Top Mike Hutton Withrow here at OutKick.com. Chad, you from the jump, you're like Hutton. You were going to love America's team, the Gambler and his Cowboys, to the point where I forgot what we were doing, but you were like, just watch the opening.
I was like, you got to. It's one of those where annoyingly I sat you down and made you watch the first
2 minute or whatever it is.
It's like 8 to 10 minutes. The start of it.
It was fantastic. And McClain Way joins us. He's the director of America's team, the Gambler and his Cowboys. McClain, thank you for the time, man. Hope things are well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Excited to chat Cowboys with you guys.
How much feedback have you been given over the opening scene there before you hit the credit?
Quite a bit, yeah. People have been very complimentary about it, which is nice. It's like in Netflix land, which makes sense, and we've made a lot of documentaries for Netflix. You really do kind of need to lead with a captivating, big first 5 minutes to hook the audience. It's not theatrical where you're kind of already sitting down and maybe you can like slow burn a little bit more. So cold opens are like a very important part of our industry. People are on their couch. They don't know what they're going to press play on. They give your documentary series a chance, and you got a couple minutes to hook them. So that first 5 minutes was important to us, and we did spend quite a bit of time on it.
No doubt.
Appreciate the kind words.
And I'm not just saying this because you're on here. I love sports documentaries. I love sports docuseries. I put yours right up there with The Last Dance, which is maybe my favorite of all time. I think about the Celtic City documentary of Bill Simmons that I loved also. But this was fantastic. And not just the start, but how you made the decisions to end each episode. And I'll give one example. The Ed Werder story about what he was told by Jerry Jones about, calling Jimmy Johnson a motherfucker and saying, I'm going to fire his arrogant ass. And he said, I'm giving you the scoop of the century. And then it just goes cold. And then it rolls with your name as the director. And I'm thinking, that is brilliant. And I immediately have to start watching the next episode when I see that. How much time do you spend when you're sifting through all this footage and everything that you have, deciding on how you're going to conclude each episode?
Yeah, that's another big part. Like the cold open to episode 1's important in when you're making Netflix documentaries, and how you end these things, because I've been shows before where I'm like, I'm only gonna watch one more, and then if like something great happens at the end of the episode, I'll be like, all right, I got to see how the next one starts, and we try to play that game too and captivate audiences. That one that you mentioned at the end of 4, we are also particularly proud of. It was a story that we had heard about, and Ed is like an amazing wealth and source of knowledge on the Cowboys, and I don't say this to diminish his contributions to the documentary, but that cliffhanger was like half the reason we wanted to go interview him. And we don't use him in the beginning part of the documentary, but we kind of just introduce him to tell the story about being at the owners meeting and kind of getting the first heads up that Jerry is going to fire Jimmy Johnson. But we always knew that we were going to end the episode on that part, because that really is a cliffhanger in the sense of like, man, what's going to happen next? But yeah, we put a lot of effort into how each of these episodes are going to end. Sometimes they change. Jerry finding Dion, or saying Jerry has a story where he's like, I was on ESPN and I looked at at the camera and I said, I know you're watching. And he was talking to Deion Sanders. This was after they lost in the 1994 season NFC Championship game. That one was another one that I think we had that at the beginning of the following episode, but then we kind of just moved it to the end of the previous episode before Dion comes in. So you kind of like play with these things and where to start and stop each one.
I love it. I love process stuff like this. And Jerry Jones is a subject. We've had a chance to interview him. He's such a great storyteller. I remember being captivated by a story he was talking about making Steven work at one of the Wendy's that he owned when he was younger for screwing up. And it was a long story, but we're on the edge of our seat the entire time. How much easier does it make your job when you've got someone that's got such a great sense of narrative? When you sit down with them for the first time about how the story should be told, about how it should look and everything else, how was it working with Jerry Jones on all of those things?
Yeah, it makes all the difference in the world. Like, it really does. And our experience working with Jerry was like, yes, when we first sat down with him, we kind of had our prepared pitch of not just process, but, what we're trying to make here, drama, conflict. And part of the reason you're pitching that to these subjects is because you want them to understand, hey, there's going to be times where you do take a lot of criticism in this documentary, or I am going to take a line of questioning that kind of holds your feet to the fire on why you fired Jimmy Johnson, or why it's been 30 years since you've been in an NFC Championship game. And truthfully, we're not doing that to make Jerry feel bad. That's not really my intention, but it's part of the narrative drama. It's part of what makes a story like this so engaging. And we always try and say, listen, our loyalties to the audience here a bit. And you kind of maybe wince when you're doing that. And I winced, especially just because I didn't know Jerry, but I'm just, all right, this guy's worth 10 or 12 billion dollars. Like, I kind of have to go in there and talk to him about maybe some of the, more, difficult chapters of his Cowboys ownership. But we'll still live, the highs will still feel super high. But he was like, he understood that so well. And it mirrored a bit of his approach when he got into the NFL. He was pitching narrative and drama and conflict and calls it a soap opera 365 days a year. And so, like, we did kind of have a little bit of a kindred spirit in Jerry Jones, which is an appreciation for good stories that have good arcs, that have good drama, and really pull you in. And so for his commitment on that was probably one of the best I've ever had in any documentary subject I've worked with.
What was the biggest hurdle that you faced?
I think that for us, what was a little bit hard was just figuring out how long of an era do we want to tell of the Dallas Cowboys, because it was a pretty wide open plate when we jumped on board it, right? Netflix called us. They were like, hey, we have access to Jerry and the Cowboys. We have NFL Films as a partner on it. It's being done with Skydance, and we were looking for directors, and they called us. And at first I knew the headlines of, yes, I knew the Cowboys were successful in the early 90s. I knew they won Super Bowls, but I really didn't know too much deeper than that, just because this did happen a little bit before, just before my time. But when we jumped in, there was kind of an element of, I knew we could get audiences to buy into when Jerry comes in, takes over the team, fires Tom Landry, and ignites a massive public criticism. They go 1-15 in their first year, which I didn't know about. And I was like, that's an amazing way to start a story. It's like, not only do you fire the longtime coach, but your first season out there, you face plant and you lose 15 out of your 16 games you play. And I didn't know that Jimmy and Jerry knew each other from the time they were 17 years old, went to the University of Arkansas, won a national championship. I knew that they won back-to-back Super Bowls, and then I didn't know why they broke up, so that was like a big part. And so in a way, I think one of the challenges was I knew I could get audiences to invest in the story of the early 1990s Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, there's this massive 30-year history that you could do a lot of time in. But there was a part of me that's like, there is something a little one note about that history, because they keep not making it back to an NFC Championship game or a Super Bowl. And so figuring out, hey, what are the eras that we're focusing on, I think was an early challenge. We ultimately obviously leaned more into the early 90s and the mid 90s and the beginning of the downfall. And then we captured the downfall in episode 8. But figuring out that scope took a little bit of time to figure out.
Were there any difficulties with certain interview subjects that just would not go into certain areas or did not want to answer questions fully? I ask because, the Troy Aikman, like the racism rumor stuff that everyone else talked about and defended him on, I felt like he didn't really want to go there at all, other than to say it was a reporter trying to make a name for himself, and didn't talk in depth about it. Did you run into instances like that?
Yeah, there were a few times, and with Troy, it was interesting because Troy was a great interview. To be honest, Troy's one of those examples where, as an interviewee, I'm interviewing him, or I'm the interviewer, he's the interviewee, and can be quiet, he can be more reserved, but there's an intensity to his words that when you're in the room, maybe you don't pick up as much. But then you get in the edit bay and you put music under it, and then Troy's like quiet intensity kind of starts to fill the room in a very powerful way. So you're right, like maybe that's not an area that he spoke really at length with, But then as a filmmaker, you kind of feel maybe his hesitation to dive into that. And that honestly makes maybe the story feel even more powerful, because you can tell that this is a story that can bring up some emotions about how he feels about certain people or certain things are this happening. And so that was an interesting area to dive in. My recollection is he did talk about it quite a bit in our interview, because it's how he remembers that third Super Bowl. I think he certainly remembers that third year as, we won in spite of ourselves to a degree, not because of how great we were as a team. So very interesting. The other things that players were like, and we kind of included in the documentary, but when we started this project and started talking to people, so many of the first questions that some guys would ask would be like, well, are you going to talk about the White House? And I knew what the White House was, but it kind of was this like early litmus test for some of these guys about like, well, what type of documentary are we making here? Like, are you going to include that type of thing? And for those that don't know, the White House is pretty much like a party house that some of the Cowboys players owned that was behind their practice facility at Valley Ranch. And so I was like, all right, we got to talk about the White House. It's an interesting story. But we interviewed quite a few people about it, and I could tell, and some of them just confirmed it. They're like, no, I have a pact that I've made with players. Like, we will not talk about the White House. It's not something we're going to discuss, not just for your documentary, but, in any project. And so we were kind of like hitting our heads up against the wall. Finally got to Michael Irvin's interview, and it was a little bit of like rubber's going to hit the road. We asked him about the White House, asked him to explain what it was. And Michael's answer was, dude, let me tell you, I was the president of the White House. And then he kind of goes on and dives into all that stuff. So you found those challenges, but you try and find the people that kind of own it. And Michael was one of those guys. And obviously we're thankful about that.
How did you get the voicemails from the women that were calling the White House phone or Michael's phone? That was, I'm listening to it, and it's just one after the other calling, trying to reach Michael Irvin. Was that from him or someone else?
That is from Dennis Padini, who is interviewed in the documentary. The Fixer, yes. Yep. And Dennis is a classic guy character that you run into these documentaries, where I don't know if he's got the storage unit or if it's in his own garage, but he kept everything. like he had the all the kind of ephemera, like all the flyers and Michael Irvin's like players card that I think like we got all that from Dennis, and he just sent it to us. And so we were kind of getting a kick out of all of it. But those voicemails are hilarious. The one that still stands out is it's the one guy that calls and he goes, Michael, I've heard you've been with my sister. I would like a word. And I could never figure out if he was angry about it or if he just kind of wanted to hang out with Michael Irvin. It was always
I'm sure you tried to find him.
Yeah, can I at least get an autographed helmet out of this or something?
Doesn't sound that pissed off.
Yeah, he was very calm about it. Yeah, it's like, I just want to hang out.
Let's make him a part of this.
Chill with Michael.
One last one for you is the needle drops throughout. It's good to have Netflix money, obviously, when you're paying for the rights to a song, but Arkansas Lovin' Man by Johnny Cash, yep. The Sign from Ace of Base, yep. Right Now by Van Halen, just the perfect song from the era for some of those moments. How painstaking is that to find the right song for the right moment?
You know what? It's like, I will say that this era, early 90s, it gave me a new appreciation for what the top 40 was in the early 90s. I think I don't know, it was, I don't know if I quite, growing up through it a little bit, really appreciated it for what it was, but this documentary was a wonderful opportunity to kind of look back and see what these guys were listening to. But, and it's more than that. I mean, Arkansas Lovin' Man was a deep cut. I mean, I don't know how deep of a cut it was, but it's not a super well-known Johnny Cash song. And my brother found that one, listened to the lyrics, played it for me, and I was like, man, this is feeling pretty good for a Jerry Jones introduction. The lyrics kind of fit Jerry really well. Ace of Base was a great one. Van Halen crushed. That was an early select that we had. We had some Spin Doctors in there, which was a little controversial in the office. I don't think everyone was on board with Spin Doctors, but we thought it played good. And listen, those needle drops, they can really like add some energy. So we were really stoked to get them in.
Well, that's energy. That's how I would describe the whole thing. You got to be very pleased with how it's turned out, right? Oh,
totally. Yeah, it's interesting when we dove in. We understood that the Cowboys are like they have a massive fan base, but we also had an understanding of how despised they are as a team, and Jerry as an owner, not just controversial but hated by some people. And when you make a documentary, you're always a little worried about how much that's going to color the reception to the documentary that you make. And I get that. It's hard to watch documentaries on subjects that you just don't like. But looking back now, I mean, even like to get a compliment from like some Eagles fans, like kind of means the world, because they're like, God, like the Cowboys suck, but I like this documentary, and you're like, all right, I'll take that. Yeah. You can still hate the Cowboys. That's all fine with us, but
that's a huge win. Yeah, that's a huge win.
It's a huge win. It really is.
It would be a win for anybody that hasn't seen this to go and binge this.
Awesome.
It's very easy to watch. If you're a sports fan, get ready for football.
Are you working on anything else like this? Because the moment I see something like this, I just want more of it. Is there something else on the docket?
We're nothing right now. We're taking a little bit of time off. We've been running through some doc series, but no, I think we're it's a good spot. We've been busy for like 8 years now, and finally gonna take a few months off and recalibrate. But it would be fun to find another big whale like this. It's like, and a lot of them they've been told before, so I feel like they're getting a little bit more rare and rarer. But hopefully new sports stories pop up and maybe they age well and you can tackle them down the road. But right now, pretty wide open.
McClain, when that does happen, you got to come on and preview it with us.
Oh, absolutely. We'd love to chat with you guys about it.
Yeah, man. Great stuff as always. And thank you for the chat today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on, guys.
And tell Uncle Kurt we said hello. We're big fans of his
right.
also. Yes.
I'll let him know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you.
McClain Way. Dude.